chapter. What? You want me to prove it? Okay, calm down. If it's facts you want, it's facts you get. But before I begin, take a moment to think of the irony in this whole affair. For the first time, the Hebrews had a bona fide piece of a major historical event, not somebody else's, but their very own. Yet they can't even use it. If I may, though, let me get very serious for a moment. This is just one example of the suppression by early patriarchal writers of the major role women have had in mankind's evolvement. I should say that again. This is just one example of the suppression by earlier patriarchal writers of the major role women have had in mankind's evolvement. It is a brutal act of censorship with but one goal in mind, the demoting of all women to the status of second-class citizens, not just in a male-to-female relationship, but more importantly in relationship to God. It is inexcusable and heinous. This is the main purpose I have in writing the Way messages, to expose to all of you the terrible acts of oppression these men have forced on women in the name of their male God. It is my mission, it is my lady's wish, it is my jihad, if you will, and I have just declared it on all those who would oppress the daughters of the Most High, the daughters of earth, whose sisters on high are truly a force to be reckoned with. Now here are the facts about Moses. Fact: the baby in the Reed story was borrowed from the birth story of Sargon of Akkad, circa 2242-2186 BC, whose mother, the temple maiden Enitum, set him afloat in a basket made of bulrushes. Sargon was rescued by the queen's midwife Aki. He was raised by the royal daughters and later became king of Akkad. Fact: the Egyptians never used Hebrew slaves to build their temples. No one but Egyptians were permitted to work the holy task, as any foreign involvement would have defiled the temple. Fact: contemporary archaeologists can find campsites of ancient Bedouin nomads. Some were where only 20 or so camped for a couple of months. There is no evidence at all that anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000 people set up camp, especially for 40 years. Fact: there is no record of a male prince named Moses in the royal family of Egypt. There is mention of pharaohs with the word Moses attached to their names. Moses is not a Hebrew word, it is Egyptian. It has two meanings depending on the context it is being used in. The first is in a proper name, such as Thutmoses or Atmosis. It means unfathered son of a princess. In its second, more ethereal use, it can mean birth. Fact: there is no record in any other kingdom that mentions 500,000 Hebrews walking by. Fact: there is a legitimate record of certain Hebrews being driven out of Egypt by the Egyptian army. This was a result of a leprosy outbreak in the outer slum areas of some cities. This is not, however, the Exodus. Those are the facts, my friend. Based on this, you may think that the Exodus never happened, and yet the Exodus of the Hebrew people did, in fact, take place, as I said earlier. Now, please understand what I am trying to say here. I don't want any chance of being misunderstood. I'm not trying to disprove the validity of the Exodus. On the contrary, I intend to prove its reality. The Jewish people take pride in their history and religious traditions. I will not in any way demean or try to disprove those traditions. I will, however, try to prove to those who may not believe in their reality that, indeed, they are based in fact and on actual historical events. The story of Moses is full of clues as to what really happened. In fact, if the character of Moses is removed, it makes perfect sense and fits with the established history. One last point about Moses. The historian Tacitus wrote about the expulsion of certain foreigners from Egypt because of leprosy. They were gathered together, driven into the desert, and left there. Later, they found water, took over some land, built a city/temple. They were led by a man called Moises, Moyses. Again, although this story may have influenced the early writers, it is not the true Exodus or the birth of the Hebrew people. Their tale is much grander and more profound than any have ever realized. There is, however, one more problem with the story. Regarding the amount of people who supposedly left, I can say this without much fear of ridicule from archaeologists and historians. There is no record of up to 1/4 of Egyptian population leaving the country. If that large a number were to leave, it would have been major news all over the world, and more so in the region. It would have meant a fundamental shift in the internal structure of Egypt and a change in the region's power structure. You can bet Egypt's enemies would have recorded this level of loss to Egyptian forces and manpower. So what really happened? You have to remember here that the Hebrews really were in Egypt and what their status was. Early writers had to have an excuse why the people wanted to leave. They have blamed this on the terrible slave conditions which they were forced to endure. Therefore, they wrote that all Hebrews were enslaved, that there were... Excuse me?
That's it.